deprem konusuna derin bir dalış tırnak içinde yapacağız. Farklı konulara değiniyor olacağız aslında ama konuların bir bütünlük göstermesine ya da sonunda bir mesaj ortaya çıkmasına gayret ettik içeriği oluştururken. Önce Mustafa hocamızla başlayacağız. Mustafa hocam Marmara bölgesindeki deprem riski ve riskin azaltılmasına yönelik bir çerçeve sunacak bizlere. Ardından Yasemin hocam, kendisi UCL'den sağ olsunlar katılım gösterdiler. O kendisi hem saha gözlemlerini hem de gelecekte ne tip yeniliklerle çalışmalara devam edilebileceğini üzerine yapı ölçeğinde onlardan bahsedecek. Ardından Orhan Beyler de AFAD özelinde aslında merkezi anlamda biz bu son depremlerden neler öğrendik, neler yapıyoruz veya neler yapmalıyız bunlar üzerine bir konuşma gerçekleştirecek. Arada benim de Marmara bölgesi üzerinde yürüttüğümüz bir proje kapsamında yaptığımız bazı araştırmalardan bahsedeceğim çok kısaca. Yani böylece işin hem genel çerçevesi, hem sahadaki tecrübeler, hem Marmara bölgesindeki yönetsel durum, onun benim anlatacağım kısım ve Orhan Bey'le beraber de merkezi ölçekte neler yapılıyor ve neler değişiyor bunları dinliyor olacağız. Ben fazla uzatmadan sözü Mustafa Hocam'a bırakmak istiyorum. Hocam buyurunuz.
Çok teşekkür ederim. Gayet güzel bir açılış yapıldı. Gayet çok kıymetli panel üyeleri var. Çok kıymetli arkadaşlarım var dinleyen. Hepinize hoş geldiniz. Ben sunuma başlamadan önce çok kısa bir açıklama yapayım. Bu dayanım resilience'ın karşılığı olarak.
Continue with my speech. I would like to preface this by saying that you are all familiar with the term resilience. However, there is a mistranslation, in my opinion, into the Turkish language. Resilience implies that you get up like a phoenix. You are born again from your ashes, or once you fall, you get back up. So just a slight side note from my side pertaining to the Turkish translation of the word resilience. Istanbul as a city is not resilient in the classical sense against earthquakes, but it is in a position to get out of the consequences of an earthquake. So the Marmara region is prone to earthquakes, as you know. However, risk assessment for the entire region has not been performed. There is some assessment done for Istanbul, of course, but not for the entire region. What is the expected performance, and how can we mitigate damages or remedy the damages? I'm not gonna show you any detailed earthquake map at all, but this one is important, which shows the fault lines. The black ones are the fault lines that have not, that did not break, have not broken for the past 2 centuries. And then I'm going to talk about the risk analysis. This is the global earthquake model, GEM, established in the 2000s. Turkey is part of it. You see Europe on the lower left-hand corner, and here you see already that the Marmara region is under great risk, but the region where we had the last earthquake this year in February is blue and doesn't show any risk according to the legend here. And on the lower right corner you see the expected damages in Turkey. We're talking about 1 billion, an annual 1 billion USD worth of damages to be expected in Turkey. So this is the distribution of potential damages in the Marmara region. You have hexagons here, as you can see. you will need to calculate the surface area in square kilometers and then index this to the construction investment, and then you can calculate potential damages. So as you can see, once you concentrate on Istanbul, it gets redder and redder. And wherever we have lower worth inventories, the risk is also shown as lower. This is the annual average damage. Most of the damage is to be expected in Istanbul. I'm not going to read out the numbers here. You can read them for yourselves. The reason for that is because Istanbul is a place where the most valuable assets of the country are concentrated. This is the ESRM 20 European Earthquake Risk Model. You see red coloring in and around Hatay, and apart from that in the Aegean region and in Istanbul. The numbers here are of course very important, but the most important number here is the number 500, equaling 500 years. So we are expecting a major earthquake every other 500 years. And this is the model. And since we have been monitoring this for the longest time, we can conclude that we are successful in the risk assessment. On this slide, you see annual average damage rates on the left-hand side. You see economic damages in the middle, and casualties and fatalities on the right-hand side. I'm having difficulties reading the numbers because they're so tiny on the slide, but let me tell you that these are annual numbers, and these are annual numbers, as I've said, and these mean numbers are important to us because they show the level of risk that we are exposed to. Different provinces and different cities in the region of Marmara, Istanbul ranks first. This is a study performed for DASK, which is the earthquake insurance authority. We need to calculate the premiums, of course. This is that study based on provinces, damage rates. So for 50 years, there is the possibility of exceeding the expected levels by 10 or 2% depending on the province. For the Marmara region, we expect 5%. This means that, 25%. So this means that every 50 years we will lose 25% of the asset values, so that you can go back to the times before the potential earthquake once it happens. This is a more sensitive map. If you want to use it, you can. It shows us the losses based on provinces. Most of the damages were incurred in the provinces that are very close to the fault line. The average distance of the fault line to Istanbul is approximately 25 kilometers on average, as I've said, but the red zones are right on top of the fault line. This is nationwide, the nationwide distribution of damages, potential damages. Let's assume you pick out one province and you do a risk assessment for that province. The premium is calculated based on a rate of 1 to 2,500. And for the Marmara region, the premium is also calculated based on this formula. So, coming to a close-up to Istanbul. In Istanbul, we have approximately 1.4 million buildings and 5.6 million households. I prefer talking about buildings. The authorities tend to speak in households, but let me give you a very easy to understand calculation. In case an earthquake of the magnitude of 7.5 happens, we will have approximately 175,000 buildings that will be damaged on a medium or severe or very severe level by 50%. If you take the standard deviation into consideration as well, this number may even amount to 250,000 or 300,000 buildings. We cannot know for sure, but this is a risk distribution or damage distribution forecast. So what needs to be done? Our main objective is to prevent casualties and prevent fatalities. We need to ensure that buildings are only damaged to the extent that they are repairable after the earthquake. This is an important issue. That the industry is incurs only little damage is our main objective. If you want to reduce earthquake risks, there are 4 known methods or actions to be taken. You need to do a risk assessment first. You need to reduce the current risks. You need to not increase the current risk, and you need to transfer the risk. When I say reducing the risk, I mean a minimum loss of lives. Gentrification serves this purpose actually, but if you perform gentrification for profit purposes, of course this is a deviation from its main purpose. In Istanbul today, lots of buildings, also in the Marmara region, are trying to get hold of a green certificate for their buildings. But they should rather aim to obtain the Platinum Performance certificate. They should ask questions when they send their children to school, whether the school building has that Platinum certification. And we need to introduce the earthquake financial liability insurance for third parties or third persons. So this means what is the responsibility or liability of the mayor, for example, of that province, who happens to be a third person in that case, because he is directly responsible for authorizing or approving certificates or licenses and so on and so forth. So this issue is directly under the responsibility of the mayor. He needs to be in a position, he needs to be privy to all the information that is necessary for license issuance. This is all I have to tell you. My time is up. Respect and admiration to all of you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. I already draw some lessons, albeit this was a short presentation. This is my habit. 2,000 or 2 to 1,000 of an asset value reduction if the earthquake strikes. That was the most interesting and striking sentence. Very much once again for this valuable presentation and all the information you provided. Secondly, we will listen to Mrs. Yasemin. Could you please project her presentation? She came right back from the field. She went to the earthquake region for the 4th time, and she'll be talking about her observations that she made in the earthquake region herself. How can we proceed? What needs to be done? She's in a much better position to talk about this from the perspective of civil engineering, and she will suggest an alternative settlement model and inquire whether that is an option. You have the floor. Thank you for being with us.
Beni duyabiliyor musunuz?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes, can I have the pointer? So I would like to thank the organization for the invitation. It's an honor to be here amongst you. Like Emin Bey also said, I am going to talk about our observations in the studies we did in the Kahramanmaraş earthquake, and we want to talk about the effects it could have on the Marmara region. So this is a study we conducted as AFAD. So what is AFAD? It's Earthquake Engineering Field Investigation Team. So it's under the Civil Engineering Chamber of the United Kingdom, and it's a field study group. They have over 60 different studies on earthquakes and earthquake plus tsunamis, and we are collecting the data and disseminating this data about the earthquake and post-earthquake situations. Like in all earthquakes, also after the Kahramanmaraş earthquake, the AFAD group has come together and they wanted to decide to have a study here or not. So there was a positive response, and there are different reasons for that, because this was a multiple earthquake and it was not just a single one. And this series of earthquakes has also an effect on a large area and with a huge number of death toll, and the destruction of the infrastructure was also large. And this showed us that there are an interaction between different types of hazards, and this was interesting for our discipline, because we had sudden collapses and we saw also the exceeding of limits on the vertical and horizontal levels, and we had also some data we could look at. The area is also large, and also the composition of the population is very diverse, be it religiously or ethnically. So the first response was here very important, and we have also, during the study, we wanted to not only look at the earthquake but also the post-earthquake relief, what the sanitary solutions or the organization for humanitarian help was like. So we put everything into consideration. And we as AFAD went to this area, and we heard that the first response was good, but not in the rural parts of the region. So this is something that has to be developed. So this type of earthquakes has also showed us how important these organizations are with AFAD and with the relief, earthquake relief organization from the United States were coordinated. So through this coordination, the groups would know who was doing what and when, and so it would lead also to a coordination and to a task sharing, so the data was not collected twice. We went to, at March, we still had an infrastructure problems in the area, but we wanted to go in the field, but we were also concerned that this would lead to a limiting of the help that was given there. So we went a little bit later, and we will shortly have our report in English and Turkish languages, and with our key stakeholders we want to share this information and disseminate it. I wanted to show you our team. We are 30 people strong from different organizations, and half of the team worked also firstly in the field. We were in a large group at first, then we went to smaller groups, and we had also another group which supported us remotely. We went in March to Antakya, Iskenderun, Kahramanmaraş. This is the area where we went as a large group, and we looked for the seismology, to the strong ground movements and geotechnical infrastructure and structures, and remote sensing and RRR. And secondly, we were working on the monuments in the region, or monumental buildings in the region, and on the third one we looked for in Hatay, Kahramanmaraş, and Malatya, and made an inventory of the traditional houses and buildings there. So we went a couple of times, and we were also in contact with the experts. And in our fourth field study, we worked together with TÜBİTAK. I want to give you now our observations from Kahramanmaraş, and the inventory of buildings was in this region, like most of Turkey, reinforced concrete, and in Kahramanmaraş we see that this construction and the urban concentration was very fast, especially after the civil war with the civil war in Syria. So we see a problem in each and every stages of the civil engineering in this type of buildings. The planning was maybe okay, but the implementation was not good. And also after the housing zoning, during the zoning period, there were made some changes, and these changes led to problems because the initial plans had changed. So you can see in this picture, I'm not going into detail, but we have problems with the material quality and with the equipment, and these we see all kinds of problems in different stages of civil engineering. But this is a red line, which is a sudden collapse or so-called pancaking, and this is also one of the main factors which led to a large number of death toll. I want to show you two sites from a report. This is from the same report in different languages. So it says the major reason for the poor performance of residential buildings should not, however, be considered as shortcoming of the code prescriptions as much as the general poor quality of materials. But I think we should here underline is that the first report was written after the 1999 earthquake, and the second one was written after the Kahramanmaraş earthquake this year. So what I wanted to say is we have a serious problem with the reinforced concrete building inventory of Turkey. And as a civil engineering committee, this was always the same message we wanted to send since the last 20-25 years. So what we saw in Kahramanmaraş earthquake or in other parts of Turkey, that we have modern building inventory, but is not qualitatively very high. So this leads to two problems. First one being these buildings cannot be categorized as a main carrying system, so it's not easy to define this. And especially after the earthquake, it is not possible or it's not easy to make an assessment post-earthquake, because these are modern but out of category buildings, and this should be considered in the evaluation. Like Mustafa Hoca said, our cultural heritage is of course what has disturbed us the most, because in the Kahramanmaraş earthquake we lost a huge amount of traditional buildings, and we saw them during our field study. We saw churches and mosques and synagogues, and most of them had problems with the masonry buildings, but we shouldn't forget that this was a rather strong earthquake. So because that these cultural property buildings belong to the Ministry of Culture, and this leads to a structured system, because you know what to do when you have a destruction of cultural property, and the ministry comes into play, and also the foundations, and they work in coordination. And I'm sure that we will receive very positive news from the area, because we have a legislation, we have a statute regarding this cultural property buildings. And another thing we should have in mind for the future is the inventory of buildings which are not registered. So we have a large amount of traditional buildings in Turkey, but they are not registered. So that's why they don't show up in the studies or the zoning regulations. And we saw buildings which have a masonry and woodwork together, a mixed use, and we have humush, the so-called humush. These are humush buildings. One of them is very, very common in Anatolia. So not only in Anatolia, we see it also in the Balkans, in Greece. This is a large amount of building inventory, and we have it's most of the buildings in the rural areas of central Anatolia. We see that after the earthquake, and also with analytical studies, that these buildings are rather strong. So these are resilient to earthquakes, and this shows us that we had traditionally an information about how to build earthquake resilient buildings. You see here a so-called humush building on the left and a reinforced concrete building on the right. So you see that on the right side you see below the tree a red part, and this is not a slab, this is a building, a reinforced building which has pancaked after the earthquake. So the reinforced concrete building shouldn't behave like this. But what we understand here is there is a problem with the quality of the reinforced concrete buildings in Turkey. And about the earthquake resilience of the humus buildings tells us also something. Because even an old humus building is more earthquake resilient than a modern but not very qualitative reinforced concrete building. So I want to go back to humus. In Antakya, Kahramanmaraş, Osmaniye and Malatya regions, we worked on over 200 humus buildings and with the damage assessment there. And we had also some experimental data, and this experimental data has been confirmed through the data we received on the field. And in the cases where we had a damage, we saw that the rather old buildings which are not inhabited and were not seen any care or maintenance, and this led to a damage in these buildings. But unfortunately, we saw that a lot of people who are living in humus buildings thought that after the earthquake that these buildings would be torn down. And it was really sad because everybody is saying everything because there is a case of an uncertainty, so everybody says, okay, they told us that the buildings is going to be torn down, and they are not even making an objection to the state for their buildings because they say there is nothing to do, and there are also objects in the houses which were inherited from their grandfathers, for example, and it's a shame. So these buildings are, we cannot make a damage assessment on these buildings like we do with reinforced concrete buildings because they have a different structure. And we see that in the damage assessment, they said this building is not habitable and has to be torn down, although it has only a small amount of damage. But we don't have a regulation for that, and these buildings were not registered. So the easy solution here is to tear them down. And the TOKİ worked very well there. So TOKİ is the Housing Development Administration of Turkey. And so this is a perception, and this TOKİ works also as well, and they build very fast, of course. And we know these type of buildings in this region where the Kahramanmaraş earthquake happened. There was a way of life, and lots of people lived in these traditional buildings. So is the only solution really building houses or housing with TOKİ? So would that mean that with while losing all of these traditional buildings, with these humus buildings, will we have a Turkey which will look in 30 years that everywhere you have reinforced concrete buildings that were built by TOKİ? So I wanted to conclude my presentation with the following. So we should all of the data we collected during the earthquake is a assessment of damage here, and this damage assessment data should be used, and we don't use it. So especially the peri-urban areas, so the outskirts of the cities are a problem, and we should learn our traditional buildings and how to build them, and we should also show this in civil engineering classes. And the use of land should be strictly controlled, and during the reconstruction phase we should also consider the traditional values of the region, and we have also a list for the people and institutions we wanted to thank. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation because there was inspections from the field and also some solutions. And from the, you said that from the reinforced concrete, from the planning up until the implication, there are problems. But we see that after the earthquake, we're still building these reinforced concretes, and the United Nations has built back better. Maybe we should think about traditional ways of building, but this is not something that is discussed right now, unfortunately. But we think that these are also options, and we should also consider this when we are building these buildings. But this has to be implemented. We have to discuss this before it's too late. So thank you very much for this very informative presentation. So after this presentation, I want to make a brief presentation and want to give the microphone to Orhan Bey. In the Marmara region, we don't have a detailed risk analysis map, and after the earthquake in Izmir, TÜBİTAK made a call for earthquake studies, and for 4 provinces north of the Marmara region, there should be an assessment map or a damage assessment report. So I wrote down here resilience, but maybe this is not wrong. I'm sorry for that, Ahmet Hoca. But UNDR has defined a scorecard. So for a scorecard for the cities to cope how they will cope with a disaster of an earthquake, for example. So there is the scorecard. So this scorecard bases on the following. We have here 10 principles decided by the UN. So these are the organizational structure, the defining of the risks, the strengthening of the financial capacity, the design or risk-focused design. These are the main principles. And we should also consider the climate change and the protection of the natural ecosystems, and the strengthening of the social capacity, and the assessment of the precarity of the region and the infrastructure. And the city planning must be prepared for this type of risks. But when we are talking about natural catastrophes, this means, of course, there are also some uncertainties. You never know. You cannot know. We should be prepared in any case, and after the earthquake, we should be able to get up and build better. So this scorecard application makes an evaluation with the help of these 10 questions. So everyone can download these criteria and make a scorecard for their respective cities. So we are working on 4 provinces in the north of the Marmara region. And this is a project which is supported by the TÜBİTAK, and we are applying this in 2 phases. I want to share with you the pre-analysis of this report. And this preliminary work has been done by the experts in the region. So these are the maximum score was 147. And people who worked on Yalova have evaluated their cities, and in Yalova we have 38, Tekirdağ 64, Kocaeli 65, and Istanbul 55. So in the Marmara region, even the people who are responsible for their cities know that their cities are not prepared for an earthquake. So this is the case we are in today. So what can we learn from the earthquake? How can we cope with the earthquake risk in Marmara region? What type of lessons did we learn from or should we learn from the earthquake in February? So these are the steps we should make next. I want to give the microphone to Orhan Bey at this point. What did we learn from the earthquake and what should be our new roadmap be? So he will show you his presentation. Thank you.
Evet arkadaşlar benim
So until my presentation is prepared, thank you very much for this lovely invitation. It's a good opportunity and an honor to be speaking at such an event and representing AFAD. I'll have the opportunity to talk about what AFAD did during and after the February earthquakes. My presentation will be divided into 3 parts. I will be going into the seismotechnological properties of this earthquake, then the operational and coordinative efforts of AFAD. Very quickly, very briefly, I just want to inform everyone what we did. And then in the last part, I'll be talking about what we do in Marmara, what needs to be done in Marmara, and then I will conclude my presentation. So this is an earthquake risk map that is familiar to most of you, I presume. We are on very important fault lines. So every part of our country is prone to earthquakes of different magnitudes at any time. We have roughly 485 active fault lines, but it looks like this is going to increase beyond 500 in different parts of our country, with the potential of creating earthquakes of different magnitude, a total length of 14,000 kilometers. This is a summary of the February 6th earthquakes, which are slightly different from other earthquakes in the sense that how they came about. The 2 major ones are set apart 9 hours. We have 7.7 and 7.6 magnitudes, and the aftershocks of a magnitude of at least 6.6. So a total of 4 large earthquakes have happened, and until the 4th of October, until yesterday that is, we have a total of 7 large earthquakes with more than 51,000 aftershocks. This shows you all of the earthquakes and their distribution as of the 1st of January this year. The majority of these earthquakes happened in the infamous earthquake region of February 2023 in the southeast. We used to measure an average of 23,000 earthquakes annually. Only this year, this average this number increased to 65,000 even. And the colors here on this map show you the intensity with which these earthquakes that have happened are felt by the general public. More than 500 aftershocks of a magnitude of 4 and larger, and roughly 60 earthquakes of a magnitude of 6 and larger have happened as of the 1st of January until yesterday. This is an important slide. These are the waves measured at the Reyhanlı station, and we see 3 earthquakes very clearly here. You see their durations. 65 seconds is the active portion of this earthquake, where the impact of the earthquake was felt the most. The video below is a shot in a pharmacy in Hatay. As you can see, medication is slowly dropping from the shelves. This is the 27th, this goes on until the 27th second. You will see in a moment, as of the 27th seconds, the main earthquake kicks in, and then the power goes out as of the 30th second. Why am I showing you this? Because it's important to take into consideration the devastating S wave of the earthquake. You need to have good reflexes and be in a position to take quick decisions if you find yourself, God forbid, in such a position, because the S wave of the earthquake, the one we saw after the 27th second, is quite destructive, or can be quite destructive. This is the light that emanated from the energy that was created. Very striking images, light that we see in the event of an earthquake. It was the night hours, as you all know, so it was because of that more striking. The earthquake happened at 4:16. This is a shot taken at AFAD headquarters at 4:36. It was a general, everyday situation for us, of course, but AFAD has more than 1,000 earthquake monitoring and registration stations spread throughout all the country, and we further want to increase this number up to 1,200. So we see here in this image that the earthquake signals coming in from 1,145 stations are gathered here, and by looking at this image merely, you can see the dimension of this earthquake by simply looking at the photograph that we shot. So coming to this slide, the affected area is large, is vast. We have conducted damage assessment studies in 21 provinces, and based on the Mercalli scale, the earthquake measured with 7.7 equaled a scale of 11 according to Mercalli, and the second earthquake of 7.6 equaled a 10, a scale of 10 on Mercalli. So the region, of course, is a region where earthquakes are expected. We know of historic earthquakes as well. Two important dates here, the year 1114, where we had an earthquake of the magnitude of 7.8, and the second, here you see it in yellow here, and the second one is the pinkish line dating back to 1513, earthquake of a magnitude of 7.4. So in that regard, as I said, we have 485 active fault lines in the country. This is why we need to be very knowledgeable and privy to all the information that pertains to the earthquake or earthquakes. You need to be prepared, you need to be apt in your management. And in that regard, I would like to introduce you to a project that we recently initiated our teams have accessed the region immediately, and this is an earthquake of immense magnitude, and you need to provide relief efforts and frontline work immediately to save lives, to rescue people. But on the other hand side, you need to collect data, because this is universally important. This is a shot from the crack, the surface crack at Hatay Airport in the valley of Amik. Lots of deformations happened. There were cracks in roads and deformations in railways. Different pictures that we shot in the field. It's important to convey all of this to future generations so that everyone remembers what happened. And this is why we consider it to be a good idea that an earthquake museum is founded. There are similar examples in Japan, for example. So on the one hand side, you are trying to provide relief efforts and reconstruction efforts, but the other hand side, founding a museum, collecting data and transferring that data to future generations is of equal importance. It's like a scar going all the way through, cutting all the way through Anatolia. We see surface cracks all over the place. And one of the most important problems right after such devastating earthquakes are secondary disasters, because with every aftershock you are prone, especially in rural areas, to severe risks of avalanches and other disasters that need to be controlled. So we had lots of studies done in rural areas pertaining to these potential secondary disasters. You have very striking images, as you can see, and they can even occur long time after the major earthquake. This is an incident where four women teachers lost their lives on their way back from school to their homes when a rock fell on the road. Liquidification is one of the major problems, especially in the region of Hatay, where these shots are from, in Nurda, in the districts of Pazarcık, and all other kinds of settlements. We have liquidification incidences happening all over. So Mr. Mustafa just mentioned the numbers are immense. Roughly 660,000 buildings have been severely damaged. Many thousands of buildings have immediately collapsed, and this is unacceptable. And we were in the field with a team as large as 35,000. That was the head count. 11,500 roughly came from organizations attached to the United Nations from more than 90 countries. Lots of security personnel was deployed in the field, and other public officials as well. It's a very large-scale operation. We have some volunteers, some AFAD volunteers amongst us. And we benefit greatly from this pool of volunteers. You can apply online, and once you become an AFAD volunteer, you have to pass a 6-step online examination, and this qualifies you to be an AFAD volunteer and take active responsibilities within our work. And we have a total of more than 50,000 volunteers year to date. This is, as I've mentioned, a large-scale operation, and roughly 3.5 million earthquake victims were evacuated from the region via different channels. And one part of these evacuees was relocated back to the region. Lots of air and sea vessels were deployed in the region. We worked there 24/7. I saw it with my own eyes, and I can say that great naval and air effort was performed, lots of airplanes and sea vessels likewise. So since this earthquake qualified as number 4 on the international scale, the entire process had to be run very, very smoothly and at this magnitude, at this scale. And up until today, almost 35 million pieces of packaged food and catering units were distributed. And earthquake victims were given a prepaid card worth of 3,000 Turkish lira, and their rents are taken care of, and other support services are provided. In a short period of time, people were transferred from temporary shelters to fixed and installed shelters, tents, 645,000 in number. And this is 4.5 times larger of the worldwide stock in tents. So a large-scale production of tents had to happen immediately as well. We had more than 1 million people that were placed in temporary shelters and homes such as school buildings and gymnasiums. Container settlements are increasing day by day in number. More than 600,000 people are placed in almost 200,000 installed containers, which equals medium-sized big cities. You have to also, let's not forget, provide all the necessary infrastructure before setting up such a container settlement. And 2 containers can only be carried by one truck. So this means lots of trucks and lots of containers for lots of people. And more than 100 million packaged liters of water had to be carried, had to be transported. And this is this number only shows us what the public sector has provided. I'm not even talking about NGOs and other providers that stepped in. These are different visuals This is the Chinese container model, very useful, especially in rural areas. It's like a tent, temporary, but it has no access to a kitchen facility or a toilet facility. So this was really initially useful, but AFAD afterwards stepped in and provided more permanent versions of these containers. They had to be forklifted and placed on appropriate surfaces. You can see that there are toilet facilities and also kitchen facilities, all provided by AFAD. Lots of municipal utilities and services are provided, like security services, all under the auspices of the Ministry of the Family and Social Affairs, psychosocial support services, on top of additional containers where our teachers are placed in to provide academic services as well. All of these efforts need to be provided by fully eligible and proficient personnel, so that things run smoothly. And for these purposes, our staff was deployed in coordination with public authorities and officials, and up until now we have also performed risk assessments in 18 provinces. And if a building was severely damaged or had a damage of medium dimension extent, citizens could apply to AFAD and apply for a remedy, because they are rights holders in that regard in 18 provinces. Excavation efforts are still ongoing. As I've mentioned, 60,000 buildings have completely been evacuated because they were severely damaged or they collapsed entirely. These are the numbers and pieces of information pertaining to permanent housing facilities. Temporary enterprises and commercial units are also a necessity. 10,865 of which we have set up in the earthquake region. We want to revive commerce in these provinces. We are at a good point. It takes a process, it takes a while. There's lots more that needs to be done. Orhan Bey, could you please come to a conclusion in 2 minutes? I will. USCEP, the National Earthquake Damage Remedy Strategy, which is like the Bible to us. It's like the Constitution for us, which includes all of these different guidelines and rules and regulations, including insurance affairs and other issues. And as I've mentioned, our monitoring capacity for earthquakes is at a very important level. We have 1,145 stations, and until the end of the year we want to increase this number to 1,200. They operate on a 24/7 basis throughout the entire country. Istanbul and the region of Marmara is under constant observation and surveillance. This is the most recent table. We have a Marmara Region specific project, MEDRAP, and many other projects, which I could talk about. There's lots to be done pertaining to Istanbul in particular, of course, and we need to start by reinforcing public buildings. Deus is another project, and within the framework of earthquake risk mitigation, we have drafted tsunami maps as well as earthquake maps. We're working together with different public entities and enterprises as well. Lots of drills are performed as well. The Marmara region also has a dense distribution of earthquake monitoring stations and sensors that are frequently placed all over the place, that use very sensitive instruments. So what I can say is that the region of Marmara is one of the best observed and monitored regions with that regard. Capacity-wise, we don't have any problems, but the problem, or the challenge rather, lies in the restructuring and reinforcing of our urban settlements, and this necessitates the support and contribution of everyone. So our expectation is that the buildings do not collapse, because once the building collapses, everything is in vain, irrespective of all the technical capacity that you have set up, irrespective of all the monitoring stations that you have set up. It's all in vain once a building collapses and people lose their lives. So this is what we need to solve. Earthquakes come with opportunities as well. It necessitates our efforts to concentrate on these fault lines and to study on these fault lines. Up until now, only a smaller portion of the entirety of active fault lines have been studied in depth, and until 2025 we envision to have finalized the study of fault lines pertaining to an additional 123 of them. And once we do that, we will have more data. This is yet another map of fault lines surrounding the Marmara region. And this will provide us with more information pertaining to the earthquake situation in the country. Actions need to be taken. Another plan which pertains to the disaster risk reduction based on provinces, IRAP, is something else that I can talk about. You can take a look yourself on the respective website. It enlists a vast list of actionable points to be taken, which need to be actualized as soon as possible. You see the rate of actualization on this table. Other efforts ongoing as well. So what I would like to come at is you need to put everything that we talk about in theory into practice. We have gathering assembly areas in cases of emergencies, and I'm coming to a close. We are restructuring, we are changing and transforming on the one hand side and increasing our technical capacity, but on the other hand side, it is of utmost importance to increase our awareness, because without awareness everything is in vain. We have seen this with our own eyes during the February earthquakes. Because imagine you are a victim of the earthquake and you try to escape. You block the roads. Of course, this is very understandable, and you block evacuation roads for everybody else. So earthquake awareness and the knowledge about what to do in case of a disaster, in case of an earthquake, is so very crucial. We need to adopt a change in attitude and behavior vis-a-vis such disasters. AFAD Agile is an application which you may or may not use once only in your lifetime. I wish that you will never find yourself in a position where you have to use this application, but I encourage you and I urge you to download this app because it enables you to send an emergency message to your people, and it makes it easier to locate you. But the number of downloads is not really up to the desired level. People download it and then they delete it from their phones usually. But I consider this very important. I talked about volunteers already. We have provided training with our AFAD volunteers. Volunteering is important, and we are very appreciative of their support.
When it comes to search and rescue, we need, of course, the support, but our priority should be lowering the risk. The lower the risk, the less we will need these search and rescue operations, but we have to be prepared for that, and therefore we have lots of NGOs and municipalities and also private companies who are organized under the AFAD, AFAD accreditation system. So some are doing logistical stuff, some are doing financial support, some are doing disaster relief. So they are integrated under the AFAD accreditation system. This is what I want to talk about briefly. But whatever we do, like I said, we should be aware that this is a disaster. This is a country where we are expecting disasters, and this could be a solution. So this is what I wanted to say about this subject. Thank you so much. Thank you, Orhan Bey. Like you also mentioned, the importance and the difficult jobs that the AFAD does is seen by everybody, and the risk has to be lowered. But the question what the municipalities can do in the Marmara region for lowering the risk assessment, this is something you touched upon, and also what the AFAD will do, or what the scope of work is to be done from AFAD in case of a disaster when the risks are realized. So we are short on time, but if you have any questions, you can ask, but we should actually be finished at 11. Thank you so much. I would like to thank everybody. So Yasemin just showed us a picture with a classical, traditional house and a house which is built, a building which is built with reinforced concrete. And so this gave us some perspective. And when we go to the disaster areas, I saw it also after the Izmir earthquake, these type of traditional and low-rise buildings don't get any damage, but the higher ones with the reinforced concrete have a lot of damage. We saw the same thing also in Greece. So the traditional buildings are safe, but are not, not serviced reinforced concrete buildings are bad. Can we say this, or does it also has a relation with the ground beneath the buildings? Well, dependent of if it's whether a alluvial deposit or it's a rocky underground. Do you have a study for that? Another question to Mustafa Bey. The urban transformation shouldn't be our priority. We should be prioritizing saving lives. Maybe we should go more into detail, because when we look at the praxis, we see that search and rescue as a priority, and the urban transformation brings a renewal on site. And this is something horrible, because when you build in a traditional sense, then you don't have access roads for ambulances or for saving. But the municipalities say, we want us to save lives. Can you give us more detail on this? Thank you for this question. I couldn't go into detail because of the time constraint, but you are correct. There are different parameters which are responsible for the strength of the building, and the ground beneath it is also one of these, and the structure of the ground under masonry buildings is the weakest link. And we saw, for example, that in Antakya, the masonry buildings were not as well. It depends on the ground, I guess. And there were no wooden beams which connected the masonry work. So this was something missing. And we did a comparison with Samos, with the island Samos, and the earthquake in Izmir, and it is correct, these traditional buildings saw also a lot of damage. But we thought it's because these buildings were not well maintained. Then their numbers were much more than in Izmir, because we don't protect these buildings, but those who are protected in Turkey are well maintained, which was not the case in Samos. So that's why we had much more ruined buildings, traditional buildings, in the earthquake in Samos. And we did a study. We have a study now waiting for us. We will be responsible for this. So we cover a large area, and we made also we took samples depending on the distance to the epicenter of the earthquake, and Maraş is a beautiful city. I didn't went there before, but Maraş gives us also gave us the opportunity to see different types of ground structures in a small area. So this was a nice, good field study for us. So a humus structure the humus yapı is behaving much better than a reinforced concrete building which has not been maintained and built up to standard. That's my takeaway. More than 50,000 people have died in the last earthquake in Turkey, and this is a crime of Turkey. So the first works for earthquakes started 100 years ago. The first seismographs were built in Italy, then in Greece, and then in Turkey, and 4 years later in the United States. And the first regulation for earthquake was in Italy in the 40s, and then in Turkey. So we see that Turkey had a very nice track record up until now, and this is really unacceptable, because we expect from now on a minimum number of deaths. These triage let's assume we see a triage. Let's take an example from Turkey. You are working in a hospital, then you have an accident, and then you have 10 wounded, injured people, and you can do anything. You can do also even plastic surgery on this. But when you have an earthquake, you have thousands of injured people, so you can't work with cosmetic stuff or plastic surgery. You have to save lives. So we have to be prepared, not only for Istanbul, because Istanbul, this earthquake could happen anywhere in Turkey. And our possibilities are also limited. So what can we do? We can do strengthening. So we are fortification, not only for the buildings, but especially to save lives. Because the buildings can be torn down and built again, that's no problem. But we have to care for that the building might be damaged, but it's still standing, so we save human lives. So this is a type of fortification we need. You can tear down the building after the earthquake, that's okay. But the main thing is we have to fortificate these buildings as much as to save lives. So we can fortify existing buildings. This is also possible for historic buildings. When we would fortify these traditional and historical buildings, then those wouldn't be damaged. And you can build them and remove them afterwards. So this is only for protection. And the most number of deaths happened in the first floors of multi-floored buildings. So if we would only fortify the first flight or the first level of the building, this would help to minimize the number of deaths. Esas Holding, HAT in Istanbul, I supported a project for 5 million, for 2 million for the fortification of these type of buildings. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Çok teşekkürler hocam. Başka sorusu ya da katkısı olan? Buyurun.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum öncelikle.
Thank you. I have a suggestion to Yasin Hoca. With the coordination of AFAD, we worked for a week there for but especially in rural areas, the comparison has been done here for buildings which are not maintained, because we all know that a reinforced concrete building, when done properly, is as strong as a steel structure building. So maybe for low rises or two-story buildings, we can find a midterm solution. That would be my idea, my suggestion. That's what I wanted to say, but maybe it wasn't clear enough what we saw, that this doesn't show us anything about the reinforced concrete building technology. This doesn't tell us that this technology is bad. No, it just tells us that we implement this technology wrongly. So we also try to understand if there is also some masons who know how to build these traditional structures and buildings, but there is a lack, because in the masonry there is a lacking of the wooden connecting structure, and this leads to a weakening of the buildings, and we want to make an inventory, and we are looking for funds to make this research. I think we don't have another question.
Merhabalar, kıymetli bilgileriniz için çok teşekkür ederim. Tekirdağ Kapaklı Belediyesi'nden Afet İşleri Müdürlüğü'nden katılıyoruz biz. Bütün katılımcılara bir soru sormak istiyorum müsaadenizle. Biliyorsunuz ki resmi gazetede yayınlanan bir yazı ile her belediye belli bir...
Each and every municipality is responsible to build a disaster controlling department, but this has been left to the initiative of the mayors, so it's not binding. What do you think as AFAD? What can we do as stakeholders? Because using experts in the four official works is important. What do you think about it? Yes, the municipalities are our biggest stakeholders, and the more they are aware, the more successful we are. When we look at the risk lowering plan of Turkey, we see that the most red areas are in the responsibility of the municipalities. But when you go down to the field, you see that the biggest problem lies within the municipalities. They say we don't have the budget, we don't have the personnel. So there is a problem in this area. And in metropolitan municipalities can departments like this build up? That is important. We are supporting this, but not only founding of this department, but also we need expert engineers here. If we cannot do this, then this won't be able. And these departments can maybe work as a coordinating center for the support, for the solutions, coordinations, and we can solve this problem. These are responsible for solving this type of problems. That's why we are supporting this, and we are telling this each and every time. And in the following months and years, we are working on a legislation for the lowering of disaster risks, and among this we have also similar subjects, but the legislation is not enough. Yes, let's do urban transformation, but beyond that we need a mental transformation before, and if we are not able to do this, then we will also be sad after different disasters. The municipalities have to put some of their budget to the disaster prevention, 1/1000 of their yearly budget, and here we also have some problems. There are other municipalities which work better, but especially municipalities who are under the risk of disaster, an earthquake, should take this seriously, and these are our biggest stakeholders as AFAD. I want to add something too. Like Orhan Hoca, the municipalities didn't work. If the municipalities didn't work on the lowering of risks, it's not because the department is lacking. No, the capacity is lacking. These capacities should be built up, and after this building of this capacity, these departments will also work properly. So we should work on the capacity. So building a department and putting 2 people there is not enough. We have to close up. Thank you.
Tek tek tüm hocalarıma, Mustafa Hocam, Yasemin Hocam, Orhan Bey çok teşekkürler sunumlar ve katkılar için. Umarım hoşunuza gitti ve verimli olmuştur. Eğer ekstra bir soru, yorum, katkı olursa çay içerken de konu.
You can ask other questions during the coffee break. Thank you.